inviting me here. It's a great pleasure meeting you guys and being able to talk about one of the subjects that I always have tried to promote as an academic leader. I will not claim to be an expert in neither open education nor the technology involved in digitalization. My background is as Ebba was saying, as a Vice Chancellor of Mid-Sweden University previously, and also before that as a Dean of the Business School in Umeå University. And in those capacities, I have sort of followed the digitalization or the opening of education for new educational channels, new educational technologies, and also been trying to promote this process all the time. Sometimes it's been difficult, I have to say, to try to change the working habits of our colleagues, as I'm sure you have all been experienced at some time. But I think the trend is still clear that there are happening things that will change the fundamental ways that we offer higher education to our students and the way we interact with our students. And it's not only promoted by the universities themselves, it's also, of course, a push factor by the coming students that are actually asking us to do other things than those that we have done in the past. So in order to be updated and to fit with the needs of the coming generations, I think there is also a reason why things need to be changed. There is a, I'm sure some of you have already read and seen this book by Jeff Jarvis, which is now actually, it was published in 2009, so in a way it's already dated in this kind of digital environment. But the take on this book was to see what would happen to the traditional industries if they were taken over by the Google ideology and the Google culture of developing the business. What would happen to the business models when the digital revolution would be taken full advantage of. And you can also, of course, ask yourself if there are any implications for higher education of the things that he was discussing in this book. And please see the book as an indication of a digital transformation rather than, I'm not claiming that the things in the 2009 publication is still valid. But the thing is, what is happening to our business models if we are jumping out of the box and looking back at the higher education from a digital position, so to say, and not trying just to follow the path dependencies of traditional universities. And there has happened a lot of things with higher education over the past decades, and one of the most fundamental changes is actually the theme of this conference. The diversity has increased in so many ways. We had well, before the Second World War, Sweden had less students than Jönköping University has today. In 1960, we had fewer students than we have doctoral students today. In the late 50s, only like 3 or 4% of a cohort of high school graduates would come into the university. Today it's 43, 44%. So of course the diversity in the student population has increased in so many ways. There are more skilled and less skilled students. There are students from different social and socio-economic backgrounds. And sometimes when we say as teachers that the students today are not up to the challenges that we put forward at a university, they can't do the math. Another way is saying that we as universities has not been able to change ourselves to meet the varying demands of the new students coming to the universities. Of course, if we have 43% of the population coming into the universities, we cannot use the method that was fit for the academic noblesse of the 50s, which were like 3 or 4% of the students coming from well-educated backgrounds, with parents having bookshelves full of poetry and literature. And today we are trying to accommodate not only those students, but also those that come from less less academic backgrounds, coming from different countries, having Swedish as their second language perhaps. Of course we have to change. And if that changes are going to take place, how could we do those changes without taking advantage of a new digital technology. I think that it sort of lies in the questions that digitalization has to be a part of the solution for the challenges that are currently facing the higher education sector in Sweden, and in, I would say, in so many other countries as well. I would start by giving a few of the problems that I have seen in terms of getting the education to become more digital or transforming the education into new educational tools. So there are a few mistakes that happens in traditional universities. One that I've seen so many times, and I'm sure we could share those experiences, and I know you are a very skilled audience that are actually entrepreneurs in terms of developing new educational offerings. But a number of other colleges, not at this conference, look on the online educational offerings, also the distance education offerings, as a less good copy of what we traditionally do in the classroom like this. And if you have that attitude when you try to develop online offerings, you are sort of lowering the ambitions to do a not as good as copy of what we traditionally do and put it online. There are limited social interactions, so how could we replace the physical interaction that we have in the classroom with something that goes on in a digital media or on a computer? That can't be done. So we are losing social interaction when we go online. We will have students that do so many other things than studying. Since they are not full-time on campus, there will be other disturbing factors. So how can we expect them to be actually committed to do the studies that they have signed up for? So, okay, we will have a limited social interaction with students that are not very interested, and we cannot control the student learning because they are on the other side of the screen. We don't know what they do there. We cannot. Well, we have now the new learning assessment tools, but many people, our colleagues, would say that it's very difficult to actually assess the performance of the students since we're not meeting them in person. So anything that we do online will be less efficient, less useful, and it will be sort of a shady, two-dimensional copy of the perfect classroom. And I think that is something that you meet in various versions when you talk to colleagues in universities. That this is something that they have on sort of on the back of the something that they have on the agenda, or something that they have as a ambition, that we cannot be as good as in the classroom. So try to be as good as it possibly can be. And I think this is a very, it's a consequence of path dependencies, basically, because we have done as we have done for so many years. So moving from classroom to being online will just make the offerings less quality. That is a mistake, I think we see sometimes at least. Another one is that when we ask colleagues what is the normal student, what is the student that we are actually developing our educations for? What is the student that we are approaching with our methods of learning? What is a high school? He or she is a high school graduate, fairly young, around the 20s. We expect him or she to study full-time, to be on campus. And we expect him or she to be very much into social life connected with what goes on campus. So with this picture in the mind of what a student is like, we develop educational tools, we develop learning methods, we try to develop exams, tests, cases, assuming that this is the student that we are meeting. And if you look at the regular teaching methods that we do have at universities, a lot of them are actually targeting the full-time campus student. And there is so many things going on changing this right now. When the Net University started in Sweden in I think it was like 2002, it doubled the number of off-campus offerings in Sweden in just a few years. As most, there was 25% of the student population in Sweden that was not full-time on campus. That was either part-time or off-campus, online, or in some sort of distributed learning environment. Those students are normally older. They are not studying to get a job. They are studying to get a new job. They are changing their careers. They have work experience. They are so much different from these model students that so many of us and our colleagues actually have as a role model for the teaching methods that we develop. I may be exaggerating a bit, just to provoke your thought a bit. And the third mistake that we often do is assuming that we have students with no relevant experience that can be used for learning purposes. We're teaching the students as if they are total blank. We're providing them with knowledge that they should consume, digest, analyze, discuss. We are not asking them, what have you done before that could be of value for solving this problem? What is your background compared to the background of other students? And also in the regular classrooms today, a number of students will have working experience that is relevant for the teaching environment that we are entering. But we are so often assuming that students does not have anything to add to the learning methods. So trying to do less comprehensive 2D copies of the three-dimensional classroom, assuming that the student is a high school graduate, and assuming that there is no experience of relevance in the classroom. Those are, I think, three things that we need to consider whether we are actually having those as some sort of background thoughts when we try to develop new educational offerings. It's something that we need to consider also for a classroom setting, but definitely when we do new types of digital solutions for our students. And all of these mistakes are slowing down the implementation of the digital media. It's slowing down the digitalization process. It creates quality problems in the digital offerings. And it provides management that is reluctant to change with so many reasons not to change, because, well, it's only getting worse. Looking at the Google students, in the What Would Google Do book, one of the main messages is that there is no mass market anymore. There is a market of many, many niches, because students or customers in general have some specific interests, and the digital tools will make it possible to reach those small communities across borders, across age groups, across all kind of cultural borders. So the niches, even though they are small in Sweden, would be big enough if we just expand it to Europe, or if we go around the planet. The Google students needs to be in control. The Google consumers needs to be in control. There is a case study in the book where he is asking what would an airline do if they were actually run by Google. Well, they would offer seats for bridge players next to each other so they could interact during the flight and have some added value of the flight. They would bring some tools to the consumers so that the consumers could actually design the experience while using the travel capacity of the airline. And in the same way, a Google student would need to be in control of what happens in the learning situation one way or another, and could not be part of a great cohort of students that are faceless and nameless. And the Google students are, of course, already part of a lot of communities, networks. It could be anything from gaming to cooking to literature or physical places, national groups, religion. There are a number of networks, communities that are already out there existing and that could be used for learning experiences as well. A Google University, there is actually a section in the book on universities which is not very well developed, so to say. But one thing that is said is that if universities will survive with Google students, the universities has to be a platform rather than an institution. A platform where people could come and interact in ways that are actually promoting the needs of the students and not the needs of the institution. And that is a fundamental change if we're thinking of a university becoming a platform instead of being an institution of learners. So if we're having those students, and we look at universities more as an enabler for the students rather than a closed environment for instructors and students, what kind of business models, what kind of business logics would be prevailing or developing in this kind of context? Again, I have no answers. These are just a few ideas taken from various parts of literature. And all the things that I'm saying now is actually going on already, so it's nothing that I've invented by myself. One thing is the unbundling of education, which is, as you know, already going on. That the students design their own curricula by choosing different components of learning from different providers. When I was at the Mid-Sweden University, we had a period of time we reduced the number of standalone courses quite rapidly. And the students that actually called us to sort of complain about this was the unbundling students, saying that my plan was to come to you in 2017 to take this course, and now it's gone. So what should I do? But the truth is that a university doesn't know where these students are. There is no tracking of unbundling students. There is no counseling office that will talk to them. There is no transcripts where we can see what they have done and how well they have performed. We are creating a unique design of their education by picking and choosing not only from the Swedish providers, there could be some MOOCs in there could be some international courses, of course. And there are so many digital platforms already available that actually helps students to unbundle the offerings from the universities. And the new students, we are quite aware of the difference between a formal university and something that is more like a learning center. But unbundling students may very well mix things that we offer from the universities with offerings from other providers that may not be traditional universities, but provide some sort of knowledge component, knowledge courses. So unbundling, maybe one of them. Instead of the 3D to 2D, there's been discussions on what a multidimensional model of learning would actually mean, where you use the community for learning, you put the questions and answers out in the community of learners, which actually take advantage of what the other guys in that community do or have done. You add international experts, you could add instructors as well, or literature, or different kind of learning resources into that community in order to support the learning. This is going on as well as you know, there are classrooms where you have a Wikipedia as one of the learning tools, as well as a Harvard business case and discussions group among students. And developing the pedagogical tools to actually do that kind of learning development is something I think research should be focusing on in the near future. What is actually working and what is not working when you actually lose control of the learning situation by giving it out to a community of learners and instructors. When it comes to research, we have in many universities come to conclusions that we need to have a profile. We cannot research everything all the time. But when it comes to education, we are still, most universities are still pretty wide in their offering. They're doing a lot of different things. If you look in the future and you think alliances, you may have some universities that actually cut off a lot of the educational offerings, focusing on those that are actually closely connected to the research capacity and the research excellence that they have. And instead of doing all the other things, team up with other universities that have made different choices. We are far from seeing this happen today. But there are some alliances that goes on, for example, in offering MBAs. There are a number of alliances offering joint MBAs. We see some joint degrees. But what we don't see is this being used as a strategic tool for developing the university sector as such. But it would be one of the tools needed to actually make the profiles in teaching offerings more niched than they are today. Another thing that is already happening is the corporate university, of course. There are big corporations that actually buy solid degrees from institutional providers, but they deliver them in-house, either to their trainees or prospective employees. And in terms of the globalization of different businesses, this is something that may increase, and there will be more and more tools to facilitate this development. Swedish universities will be, in the bandwagon, far behind in this process because of so many reasons in the regulations in Sweden. But some countries like the UK, which are now setting up campuses in various parts of the world, or American, Australian universities, are actually doing this right now in various settings with different types of agreements and with different types of digital tools to facilitate this. A global company today is often used to using different kind of tools for communicate and problem solving across the globe. So adding teaching to that would not be, or is not, a major change in the way they work already. One thing that may be there for us to do at the universities is actually to validate the competences of people coming into the campus saying, well, I've done all of these things. Could you validate that and give me a degree? Some American universities are already doing this with mocks. They are offering the mocks for free, but then if you want to validate it to a degree, you have to pay. So we may be degree factories, not offering the education, but having the competence to validate the formal training or work experience of people coming up from the street into the campuses. Not a lot of our colleagues would like to do that, but it may happen. And also, a true international university system could come. There has been so many barriers for internationalization of universities because of national regulations, but some of them are slowly being lifted. And if we are working anything like industries in general, there will be a more international environment also for the universities, where we perhaps do different things in different places, or have a niche that we exploit in different locations, not only at our home campus, where the geographical place of the university is not sort of the thing that defines the university. Today, almost all Swedish universities has a city in the name. Take away the city and see what is left. That kind of university need to be or could be an international one. Again, these are things that are happening right now to some extent in the periphery of the system. Perhaps not all of it would be successful or gaining volume. But I think if we want to see what is actually happening, we shouldn't see at the center of the university world. We should actually look in the system's periphery to see what are the new things that are actually developing there. I hope I'm not offending anyone by saying like Karolinska Institute in Sweden or Stockholm School of Economics does not need to change anything because the campus students will roll in there forever in volumes that are supporting the traditional way of teaching. But the smaller schools in the outside that are actually having a strong drive or strong demand for change, that is where we would see new things happening, I think. Then you can always say, why are things moving so slow? Well, one thing is that our organizations are inappropriate for change. We have faculties who are disciplinary organized, which is great for so many things, but it's not great for change. We have a meritocracy where the senior professors say has more value than the junior professors' opinions. And in such a system, we cannot expect the senior professors to be those that are willing to change the first. Those carrying the change, the young employees, the young co-workers at the universities, has the less to say in the university organization. So our organization are sort of inappropriate for anything that has to do with change. A lot of past dependencies, the lock-in effects, the groupthink, the mistakes that I was discussing, all of that is all around campus. The barriers to entry are high. In Sweden we have the price barrier. Tuition is free for Europeans. As long as you have something that is free and something else that costs, it's a very good way of preserving the structure as it is, to have it free where everything else is costly. The diploma monopoly is another barrier to entry. In most countries there is a need for some sort of government recognition in order to issue diplomas, and those recognitions is only given to university organizations. And as long as we have that, that's a very efficient barrier to entry. And there is a lack of motivation, I would say, to change, because teaching, not always, not all the time, and not at all the places, but teaching is not the driver of change at universities in many cases. The research environment sort of dictates the agenda at the university, whereas the teaching is not as motivated in terms of being a driver of change. So these are some things that prevent change from happening. But sooner or later, the Spotify effect will hit us. There will be an invention that actually changes the business model. At the same way as we are hopefully crushing the publishing monopoly soon through the open science movement, something may happen that actually creates a new spot of opportunity for someone that will change the rules of the game also at the university. A new generation not only of students, a new generation of co-workers, PhD students, lecturers have been native in the digital landscape all their life and will demand changes over time. New providers, as I was indicating earlier, may enter the market and provide new offerings that will have an effect also on us. And the internationalization will consequently over time reduce the barriers to entry for new incumbents or new providers in the market. Okay. So that was just a few remarks, something to maybe food for thought, something that can be used for discussion. And I'm not sure if we have some time for discussion now. Or
I think we may have time for one question, I think. But as I said, we have saved all the questions for the last panel session. But we have bring all together, all the speakers together.
I will not be here for that one.
You will not be there. Okay, I know that you are going to Norway, aren't you?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I had a question for you at least.
Okay.
Yes, Mohammed.
Yes, it's very nice to have this overview of all the tremendous development occurring in this field. But is anyone looking for the quality and the fiability of the diploma?
Mohammed, can you speak louder? Can't hear you. Can't hear you. Speak louder.
You cannot hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'll rise, like in the British Parliament. Rise. Yes, I think that it's very interesting to get this all kind of information. We know that it's developing. But is anyone looking for the quality provided by this diploma from this university? Because we have heard sometimes there are so many scandals occurring.
Well, we have fake universities which issue diplomas for pay. But what I'm talking about is when Columbia University issue diploma for pay for students that has taken their courses online without paying for it. So it's a difference between those that are sort of faking the diploma and those who are actually using the diploma as a tool to reach a student. So, and for those normal universities doing this, I think that the normal quality assurance system should be in effect.
Stephen.
I have a question in general, food for thought, but as a teacher, long-standing teacher. I think it's a problem to use business model to reform the university. What would Google do, right, and then apply it to the university? I think that in such is highly problematic because education is something that has an intrinsic value as well, right? It doesn't only have monetary value, right? We don't want to be a factory. I don't want to work in that kind of university, in that kind of environment. And so I think in your institution, I think there should also be a debate what is education, right?
Yeah.
And following an Anglo-Saxon model, just like that. And what would Google do, right? Google is a monolithic corporation in the world, right? Eating everything up. I think that should be a discussion as well, rather than what should we do, what should we think about this.
Yeah, I agree. And the using Google was most just having a catchphrase for pinpointing a development on digitalization that has been used in literature. So that was the only reason. But I agree that there is a difference underlying this, whether education is something as a benefit for the society or a benefit for the individual. And the Scandinavian thought is that we have education as a benefit for the society. We give it away for free because we need it to have a good society with good individuals. But I think those values will be challenged unless we protect them in one way or another. And in that way, we should also engage in these transformations because it will happen. And will be more, if you use that language, it will be more challenging if we are not sort of taking the lead in that development. And then on using the business language is sort of following the catchphrase, and I'm from the business school, so. But I totally understand what your point is, and I agree that these are very important issues.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I had a question regarding the fascinating three attitudes that you put up on that you think are mistakes. And it struck me as very interesting when you present the assumed student population that universities are aiming for. We very often hear diversity in terms of including the marginalized immigrants, that we very rarely hear about diversity in terms of other identity categories.
Right.
So for instance, gender, or for instance, functional disabilities. You know, so there is also that need where disability and gender become kind of invisible.
Right.
In these kind of, so you had age and recent graduates and studying full time, and those are very valid points, but there are also these identity positions. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes, what I'm saying is that we do see that the classroom is filled with people of different backgrounds from different countries, and with, as you say, disabilities, there are different genders, etc., etc. But we still prevail on having a teaching method that is designed for one particular type of students. Typically a male high school graduate coming full-time to campus. I'm not saying that this is the case all over the place all the time, but there is dominating the picture, and we are actually also using that when we are going online, where the differentiation and diversity is increasing even more than it's in the classroom.
I completely agree. In fact, if you're interested, we published a recent article in Informatics. And this was an unusual study because we were doing ethnographic studies following individual cases. And one of the important points we make there is that people who have a range of abilities or disabilities or whatever you call it, they are much more adept at participating in university lives in Sweden, but they are marginalized because their abilities are not recognized. So there is this need to kind of bring these together.
Yes.
We have a short question.
Yeah, well, I just wonder, well, you know, the concept of bildung, which I think has been prevailing in the Scandinavian countries.
Concept of
Bildung, which is this kind of an encompassing concept of education, which is much more than any of the corporation and all of that. Is what he was saying. We should really protect that, I think, and we should aim at having debates and saying what is what we really want to be. Do we want to be a corporation, or do we want to be something different? So yeah, it's really tricky the moment we're living now. I think it's very.
And I think the internationalization will reduce the value of the national cultures, and you know, it's like when commercial TV came. You know, we have tons of channels coming from the satellites, and still we prevailed having non-commercial Swedish public channels. But these became just 2 out of 100. And I think we need to open up the discussion, what will happen to those intrinsic values of education, which we share with so many other countries as well, when the market and the education is open up for new offerings and new ways of actually gaining knowledge. And we could take a lead in that development.
And one should debate and one should discuss and not just be overwhelmed by the corporation model and just be.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you so much, Anders, and I would like to say that I feel really confident that you will be the new Director General for the Swedish Higher Education Authority, taking those challenges ahead, not at least for the Swedish universities, but also for national and international context. As you are leaving, you are going to Norway, I think. I knew that in advance. We have not only presents for all the speakers, but we have donated money to the Hunger Project, which